Hello, my name is Gabrielle Bonini, and I am part of Group 10. This is our second case study, and the case that I am going to be talking about is related to the Dan Cooper hijacking and some money that was found on the bank of the Columbia River on the Tena Bar. So the case in general is that Dan Cooper was a man who was trying to get on flight number 305 that's on his way to Seattle, Washington. He looked like a normal person, and then part of the way through the flight, he handed the stewardess a note, claimed he had a bomb in his briefcase and wanted her to sit with him. He even, once she did comply, opened up his suitcase, showing a bunch of wires and what looked to be red-colored sticks, making her believe that there was a bomb. She obliged. He talked to her. He told her to write down a note, and his requests were that he wanted 4 parachutes at $200,000. When he landed in Seattle, Dan exchanged the passengers in return for the money and parachutes, and then took off again on his way to Mexico City with some of the crew members that were retained. Somewhere between Seattle and Reno, Dan jumped out of the plane and disappeared. His fate to this day is still a mystery. Relative to the case and how it applies to forensic botany is that some money was found on the Tena Bar along the Columbia River, and this is around about the same area where he may have landed when jumping, and they wanted to find out whether this money was actually part of the hijacking ransom money to try and be able to trace where he went, because he still hasn't been found. So 3 bundles of $20 that totaled around $66,000 was found on the shore of the Columbia River on the Tena Bar. The serial numbers matched the ransom money from Dan Cooper's hijacking. And relative to the forensic investigation, which is the section that I am doing, the scene where the money was found was assessed, measured, and replicated so that the money and potential samples to be compared could be replicated in ways that the money may have taken place or been in situations that may replicate that were similar to the money that was found. And then the money was assessed with the use of a scanning electron microscope, or SM. So I need to get out of the way over here. One of the original Cooper bills was sampled and placed on SEM stubs with double-sided carbon tape, and then gold coated in a vacuum evaporator. And then 5 samples were collected from 2 modern bills that were soaked in the Columbia River in a controlled environment for 15 minutes on 13th of November. This is around about the time where Dan was supposed to have hijacked the plane and jumped. Third sample set was collected from 500 milliliters of Columbia River water that was collected on the 1st of March to see roundabout whether, because the Columbia River is a regularly analyzed river for diatoms, to see whether the money and the diatoms on the money that was found were closer to when he jumped or not. And then modern bills were soaked in this water, then air dried, and 4 of the bills were placed on SEM stubs. The second and third samples were also coated with palladium instead of gold. So the samples were examined under a JEOL T300 SEM at various magnifications, and then raster scanned by eye, which is where you're looking at your field of view and you move from left to right, diagonal back to left, to right, diagonal back to left, and to make sure that you look at the whole entire field of view, to ensure that you look at as much of the field of view as possible. So the raster scanning was also assisted with energy dispersive spectroscopy that was assisted through an EDAX octane silicon drift detector, which ran between 10 and 15 kilovolts, so that the spectra that were analyzed on the EDAX team software. Some of the samples were buried under approximately 9 kilograms of sand in a container that allowed for flow of drainage through to the bills. The stacks of bills were buried in various positions, from vertical to horizontal, just to see if the various different drainage types would cause different diatom deposition on the bills. and what bills, the top bill, the middle bill, the bottom bill, to see what diatom deposition would look like. And then they were observed under the sun. 200 milliliters of sand sample was collected from the surface of where the money was buried on the Tina bar, and it was processed for diatomic extraction with the known diatom extraction protocol that uses hydrogen peroxide rinse with potassium dichromate that sits overnight, and then it's filtered down several times. And then 100 more modern bills were wrapped in a rubber band and floated in an aquarium that did not have agitation to allow the water to seep into the bills for several minutes. And then they were analyzed as well, just to get an idea of how how water seeps into money to get that diatom deposition. For the analysis, diatom deposition was analyzed on a genus level to be able to identify the time frame so that we know when roundabout that money was exposed to the Columbia River water and area, to assess whether it was part of the Dan Cooper's hijacking, when it was placed, how it got there. One of the main results of this analysis was that there was a large amount of genus mix for the samples with only a small amount of overlap. The matching genera were limited and encouraged the use of broad comparison to make sure that timeframes were for the money that was found, which timeframe it fit into based off of the sampled analysis that was done and the various timeframes, whether it's November or March, to see roundabout when that money was deposited. The Cooper bills did not get submerged in the Columbia River during November, but it does match the diatom samples that were collected for the May to June sample, which was the sample that was collected in March. This ends up saying that the money that was found on the Tina bar was not actually related to the Dan Cooper investigation. It just ended up being placed there. And then those are my citations.